Welcome into your Pig Trail Nation update. I am Tara Talmadge alongside Mike Irwin. It is game week for the Razorbacks taking on LSU this weekend. But Barry Lunney, the interim head coach, having a press conference this afternoon talking about a number of different topics. Mike Irwin was there for all of that. But one of the most interesting topics, I think, was learning about the play calling and some of the changes that might be happening this weekend. Let's take a listen at what he had to say.
And Chief have been working relentlessly on the game plan. We've had a full 3 days head start, on LSU, which is critical and good. And it's what you should use the open date for. And I think we've done that. And so, that's not my job to right now at this point to get involved from a schematic standpoint. Obviously, in the offensive room, we always collaborate. We have since I've been here and working with these guys, and every offensive staff I've ever worked with. It's not a one-man show. We've had a good week of collaborating and talking through the things we're going to do and what we're going to look like this week and coming together in a consensus on this game plan. And then I'm going to let Chief and Joe do what they do as the play callers.
So it sounds to me like there won't be a lot of noticeable changes or anything on the play calling side.
I don't believe that. I think he's doing a whole lot of stuff right now that he doesn't want to reveal. He did say, and we didn't hear it in that clip, but he said that on the sidelines, anybody on the offensive side, any of those coaches, if they see something, they can come to him, and if he thinks there's something there, he can pass that on along to Craddock, and that might influence the play calling. I think he's downplaying his role a little bit. I think he will be more involved, but I think the big change, if there are any, is going to come in practice, develop the game plan that he talked about. They now have had 2 weeks to come up with a game plan. And he keeps talking about he has a plan for the quarterbacks.
Yeah.
Well, that's not just a plan for who I'm going to start.
Right.
That's a plan. What is the quarterback going to do? What is our play calling? Is there anything different we're going to do? And to me, it'd be nuts not to change it, because every time we've seen a starter lately, the opening series, 2, 3, 4, usually the first quarter, even the first half, it's just crashing and burning.
Yeah.
So to me, they've got to have sat down and said, hey, let's analyze what's been going wrong. And let's try to come up with something different that will help our quarterback be successful in the first quarter rather than just going right off the bat.
Yeah, he kept calling it a collaborative effort. But also in terms of the quarterback, he hasn't announced who it is, even though he does say that they, like I said, they have a plan.
Yes, he
He's
knows.
Like, it's not an advantage or anything to LSU if they announced it. He said it's not a huge advantage, but he just doesn't want to give them any help regardless. So that's understandable.
We've watched some of the practices. We haven't seen any this week because the first one is tomorrow. But last week, just looking at the body language of the quarterbacks, I'd say it's going to be KJ Jefferson.
Right.
Because his whole demeanor was different last week. He had the chest out. He had a little bit of swag. Between plays or reps, he just kind of had his head up.
Hey, that says a lot.
He just looked like, I'm cool. I got it.
We'll wait and see.
That's a guess on my part. He could be acting or faking it. I don't know. And I wouldn't be surprised. I'm not saying this definitively, but I wouldn't be surprised if Starkel is not back in the mix at some point. I think Barry may have seen some stuff with him, and they may have sat down and discussed what his problems are. There's all kinds of rumors that if a certain head coach comes in here that they hire, that Starkel would be the guy next year, that this coach would know what was wrong with him and would turn him around pretty quick. I mean, again, the guy had talent when he got here. This is the biggest shock to me of the season, is how he's just crashed and burned.
Right.
And I'm just going to say it's my opinion, but I think it's who coached him.
Yeah.
And those people aren't coaching him anymore. At least the head coach isn't. And the quarterback's coach may have changed some things. So we'll see. We'll see if all that happens, but it's nice to talk about. It's like little conspiracy
What'll
stuff.
happen.
Yeah,
he came in looking a lot better than he does at this point in the season. But the defense has also looked pretty rough over this course of the season. Barry Lunney, you asked him a question about what the problem was with the defense. Let's hear his response.
During the course of the year, I'm staying in my lane, with the tight ends and then the special teams responsibilities. As you can imagine, my plate's been very full. And now in the last, 8 days, my plate's been very full as well. But I think you would be quick to say, or it'd be easy to say, that at times we have played some really good defense, and we've just had, some breakdowns, and it's kind of been a perfect storm. Just hearing Chief talk about it and the other defensive coaches talk about it. I mean, it's, when we've made some mistakes, it's really it's been glaring because they've hit the exact right gap or the right exact calls, and so that's created some of the larger, more explosive plays. And so, and again, our focus is to play our best game. And in order to do that, man, you got to play your gap, your responsibility, play with grit, toughness, great effort, and then maybe we can piece together 4 quarters of really good defense and the moments that we've captured, the periods and the quarters that we've captured. That's what we're going to need to do these last 2 weeks, is to play our very best for 4 quarters on both sides of the ball. Obviously.
Yeah, I think it's going to be an interesting, to see if they can improve on the defensive side of the ball. I think it was Scuda, after one of their more recent games, who said they've just been terrible at tackling this entire year. Yeah,
and again, this may not be the case, but it's almost like, to me, he didn't want to say certain things.
Right.
I just know what I do is I try to put not that I think I'm a coach, but if I'm in his position suddenly, that's the first thing I'm going to do. I'm going to go over and ask Chavis, how is it that you guys didn't stop Western Kentucky one single time in the first half? I've never seen that happen before.
Right.
They scored every time they had the ball. And in the second half, they didn't cross the goal line. Now, some have said, well, they backed off. I don't believe that.
Yeah.
They just look like a different bunch of guys. Now, was it that Chavis made some adjustments schematically? Was it that he chewed them out and they realized how bad they were and so they played harder? I don't know. But there's a reason why this is the biggest mystery. It's even more of a mystery to me than the crashing and burn quarterbacks, is why this defense at various times has looked really good, and then at times they've just looked terrible. I mean, I would remind people that Starkel brought them back from a deficit against San Jose State, and that game was tied with about 2 minutes to go. He did everything you want an offense to do. He got you back in the game, placed it in your hands as the defense. All you got to do is make those guys go 3 and out, punt, and you may have a chance to come back down the field and kick a field goal and win the game. Instead, I think they went down the field in about 4 plays. That was ridiculous the way they collapsed. So there's got to be a reason for that, and I don't know if Lunny knows what the difference is. I don't know if he's telling the truth when he says, hey, that's not what I do. I just kind of, this has happened and that happened. But to me, if I'm the interim coach, I want that defense to change. And I'm going to figure out why it's looked as bad as it has. I don't care if I have to get in the defensive room, ask Chavis to move aside, and get those seniors up there and have them turn and ask every one of those guys, what were you doing in the first half against Western Kentucky? Stand up and explain it. Yeah. What did you do? What was going through your head? How do you think you performed? And then when they're embarrassed and have to admit it, maybe they do something about it.
The defense is going to have their hands full this weekend.
Well, absolutely, because you're sitting there thinking, you couldn't stop Western Kentucky. You didn't stop them one time in the first half. What's going to happen when LSU come? You go to Baton Rouge. That was at home. You're going into Death Valley. Mm-hmm. It's a little bit scary.
Yeah, I would say so. Mike, what do you think the expectations aren't very high for this Arkansas team going into it, but Lunny keeps saying, I want this team to have their best game that they've had all year. What do you think that looks like for them?
Well, I think if they played it fairly close, maybe if they do a little bit of what Ole Miss did, you're not going to stop these guys. Maybe they're going to score 45, 50 points, but if you could limit it to that, not 70, and then you could put 20, 25 points on the game and show some fight, I think that would be encouraging. So we'll see if that can happen. I think what a lot of people have is their fingers crossed that what's been going on so far is bad coaching and no motivation. Yeah. I even have people tell me they think the players kind of started screwing up on purpose because they wanted Morris fired. Now you'd have to be in their heads to know if that's what they really did. But we're going to see when this game starts if there's a totally different attitude. Yeah. And maybe there will be and maybe there won't. Maybe it'll just be more of the same. We'll just have to wait and see.
One of the other interesting things that you mentioned from that press conference as well was that we are not going to hear from the players at all this week. Usually we would hear from them at least once during the week before a game.
A part of me believes that that's coming from Juracek. Yeah. That we're not hearing from any of the. Lunny said, "I'm the voice of the team." Right. So far, ever since this firing took place, who's talked? He has.
And Lunny.
Yurchak and Lunny. And nobody's asked Lunny, hey, what do you think about the fact that you could be fired in 2 weeks when this is all over? You could hire another coach and you might not have a job. So nobody's asked him that, but it's almost like they're afraid that to ask any of the other coaches that question, because a lot of them are going to be on the chopping block.
Right.
And the players, did you want this? Are you glad that Morris is gone?
We don't know.
They kind of don't want them to say that, probably.
Which is understandable.
So I don't know if they're worried about that. Lunny said, I want them totally focused, and I don't want them thinking about media or anything. And, okay, I get that, but it sort of reminds me of something Houston Nutt said one time. After letting us go to all of his practices for several years, he got mad one day and suggested that they were losing games because of us. And we're standing over in the corner. And after he did that, the next day I asked one of the players coming off the fild if we'd been a distraction for them. And he said, who are you?
That answers your question right there.
Yeah, they don't know a lot of them don't know, they don't care. So I don't think walking in there and answering a few questions after a practice is going to freak them out and cause them to be non-focused. So what I really think here is they don't want them talking in this situation. Now, let me just say this, because this is really important. I don't care. I don't necessarily like talking to players. They don't usually say anything. There is an exception.
Yeah.
Musselman's players. That press conference Saturday after that win was the best stuff I've ever heard from players. It was funny. It was revealing. If players were like that all the time, we'd love to talk to them.
Absolutely.
But usually they're not.
Yeah.
They just say politically correct things, and it's boring, and you're just going, well, why don't we just talk to the coaches? So I'm not upset at all that we're not talking to players this week.
Well, you guys can hear more from Barry Lunny in our shows coming up later today. Mike's going to put together a really good story with some of that sound. But that's going to do it for our Monday Pig Trail Nation update. Thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching this Pig Trail Nation report.